It is 6:20 in the morning in a small town in Nagano, and Aiko is already awake, not because her mother called her, not because an alarm forced her out of bed, but because she knows the piano is coming. She pulls on yesterday's sandals, grabs a small paper card hanging by a string around her neck, and steps outside into the gray morning air. Down the street, other doors are opening too. An old man in a tracksuit, a mother still in her apron, a boy from Aiko's class rubbing his eyes. They all walk toward the same small park, and by 6:28, more than 30 people are standing in loose rows on the grass, waiting. Then it starts. A soft, slightly jaunty piano tune crackles out of a small speaker, the same tune that is played in this exact spot for longer than anyone standing there has been alive, tinny and a little worn at the edges, but unmistakable. Arms lift overhead, bodies bend sideways, knees rise gently to the rhythm. Nobody is shouting instructions. Nobody needs to. Every person here already knows the moves by heart, the same way they know how to tie their own shoes. This is Radio Taiso, and at first glance, it looks like nothing at all. Just a few stretches, a few minutes, a slightly old-fashioned habit that outsiders barely notice and rarely understand. But look closer, and you will find something stranger and more powerful hiding inside this ordinary routine. A habit so deeply woven into daily life in Japan that it quietly shapes how millions of children learn to start their day, show up for their community, and build a kind of discipline that has nothing to do with being told what to do. Radio Taiso did not begin in Japan, and it did not begin as a cultural tradition at all. It started in the United States in the 1920s, when an American insurance company designed a short radio exercise program to keep its workers healthy, and quietly, to keep its business looking good. Japanese officials visiting America around that time noticed the idea and brought it home. In 1928, to mark the enthronement of a new emperor, Japan's national broadcaster aired the very first version of the program, calling it a national health exercise. It has barely changed since. Every session runs about 3 to 5 minutes. There are roughly 15 movements in total, stretching the arms overhead, rotating the shoulders, bending at the waist, small jumps, gentle twisting of the hips. None of it is difficult. None of it is meant to build muscle or make anyone sweat. The entire point is the opposite of intensity. It is designed so a 7-year-old and a 70-year-old can do the exact same movements, side by side, without either one struggling. The routine is broadcast every single morning by NHK at 6:30, reaching homes, schools, parks, and offices across the country at once, the same notes falling on millions of ears within the same 60 seconds. For a brief window during the 20th century, the exercise was pulled into something darker, tied to wartime nationalism and military training, and it was banned outright after the war by occupying forces who worried about what it represented. But the habit refused to disappear completely. Within a few years, it returned, stripped of its wartime meaning, and went back to being what it had always been underneath, an ordinary way for an entire country to wake its body up at the exact same moment, every day without needing anyone to explain why. For children specifically, the habit takes its most memorable form during the long summer break, when school is out and the days stretch on without much structure. Local neighborhood groups organize daily morning gatherings in parks and schoolyards, and children are given a small paper card, a Radio Taiso card, hung around their neck on a string. Each morning they show up, they receive a stamp. Miss a day, and the empty space on the card stays visible, impossible to hide from. Complete the whole card by the end of the break, and there is usually a small reward waiting. A pencil, a notebook, sometimes just candy. On paper, it sounds almost too simple to matter. But watch what it actually does. It gets a child out of bed at a fixed time during weeks that would otherwise have no fixed time at all. It puts them in a park next to their neighbors instead of alone in a bedroom. It gives an unsupervised summer morning a small, gentle shape, a beginning and an end where before there was only open, formless time. And because the reward is so small, the card is never really about the pencil or the candy. Children keep showing up because the stamp itself has become the point, a quiet, daily proof that they did the thing they said they would do. Nobody is lecturing them about discipline. Nobody is sitting them down to talk about responsibility. The habit teaches the lesson without ever naming it. A child who has filled 20 squares on a small paper card by the end of August has learned without a single conversation about it what it feels like to keep a promise to yourself, morning after morning, whether or not anyone is watching to check. This is where the habit reaches past childhood and quietly explains something larger about how Japan works. The same 3 minutes of stretching that children do in a summer park is the same routine performed at school assemblies, at company sports days, and on factory floors before the first shift begins. A student in a rural mountain town and an office worker in central Tokyo can meet as strangers and still know, without a single word of explanation, the exact same sequence of movements down to the last stretch. There's a word in Japanese for this idea, kata, meaning a fixed form or sequence practiced so many times that the body performs it without the mind needing to direct every step. Once a pattern becomes kata, it stops taking up mental energy. The body simply knows what to do, which frees the mind to focus on everything else the day requires, the way a person no longer has to think about how to walk down a familiar staircase. Schools lean on this quietly but constantly. Children stretch together before morning assembly. They stretch together before sports day. They grow up inside a rhythm where showing up and moving together is simply what a day looks like, not something anyone had to convince them was worth doing. And because everyone in the country learns the identical sequence, the routine becomes a kind of shared language spoken through the body rather than through words, something that can quietly reconnect a community after something has gone wrong, in the way people sometimes gather to do the familiar movements together after a difficult season or a disaster. A single small habit repeated without complaint becomes the invisible thread that ties a classroom, a company, and a whole country to the same rhythm. None of this looks like much from the outside, and that is exactly why it is so easy to miss. A visitor walking past a park at 6:30 in the morning sees a handful of sleepy people waving their arms to tinny piano music and moves on without a second thought. What they do not see is a habit that has quietly shaped how an entire country understands consistency, community, and showing up, one ordinary morning at a time, for almost 100 years. Aiko does not think about any of this while she is standing on the grass, bending sideways to a tune she has heard every summer of her life. She is thinking about the stamp she is about to earn and the friend standing next to her who is stretching just a beat too slow, again. But somewhere underneath that small, sleepy moment, something is quietly settling into her, the same way it settled into her mother and her mother before that. A habit does not need to be dramatic to change a child's day. It does not need a lecture, a reward system, or a parent standing over a shoulder insisting it matters. Sometimes it only needs 3 minutes, a familiar piece of music, and a reason to show up at the same time every single morning, whether or not anyone is watching. If one small ritual, repeated without fail, can quietly shape how a child moves through an entire day, it is worth asking what a similar habit, however small, might do for your own mornings. Somewhere close by, a child is already watching you decide, every single day, whether or not you will show up for it.